Thank you.
So I'd like to talk to you about Catalonia. I was invited to Barcelona about, must have been 7, 8 years ago, to jointly present with a member of the German parliament who had come up with, as I recall, his name was something Schmidt. Maybe Hell, but in any case, he was one of the 2 German legislators who put together the 100,000 rooftop program that's basically solarized Germany. And I was speaking on my book, Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And Louise and I had a wonderful time there. We got to know a whole bunch of people. And the story that I heard from the locals was that there had been this movement to bring back the Catalonian language that they were teaching in the public schools, and that the Catalonian region, or Catalonia, was really developing its own culture, always had its own culture, and they were kind of thinking of themselves as a separate folk, a separate people. And this was years ago. And I thought at the time, you know, geez, if they're even in their schools they're using not Spanish but Catalonian, then, you know, where does this end up? But I know that you've been talking about this in the context of economics, that you know, how the Great Crash is driving this. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. The way that the crash figures in is it's really important for people to understand that since 2008, the crisis, the second worst since the Great Depression of the 30s, is playing itself out very bitterly and very slowly. That the story of quote-unquote recovery is really a story about a very small percentage, 10% or less, of the society has in any meaningful way recovered. The other 90% are still struggling with enormous consequences. Things like the following: lower wages than they had before, lower benefits with the jobs they have than before, much less security of the job, much greater precariousness, and so on. Reduced government services because government entities are strapped for taxes, etc., etc. And the end result is economic suffering, economic inequality really going off the charts. And it makes people angry and upset. And here's where you have to get a little subtle in the analysis. I understand it's economic, you do, and a bunch of us do, but for the mass of people, there's been a 50-year period now when questioning or challenging or criticizing capitalism, the economic system, was kind of off the agenda. Taboo, scary, having something to do with the Cold War. We didn't go there. So people developed the habit of looking elsewhere. It's a little bit like, and pardon my metaphor, if you have a bad day at the job and you come home and in your frustration you smash a dish. Well, the dish didn't cause your difficulties, and smashing it is not going to solve your difficulties. But you displace the upset. What's going on in Europe now is such economic turmoil that masses of people are doing things that are like smashing a dish. They're taking steps that are clearly reflections of their economic distress and their failure to see any solution on the horizon, and they're quite right about that. But they're taking it out by doing what? The British working class voted to leave Europe for Brexit, not understanding that this is not a solution to what ails them and might very well make the situation worse. Something similar is going on in Scotland. All over Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, and elsewhere, people are raging against Europe. But that, of course, is not their problem in Eastern Europe. What they had hoped for was that by leaving the old Soviet bloc and entering Western Europe, they would all have economies like Germany, France, and Sweden. What they're discovering is that the place being prepared for them looks more like Greece and Portugal and Spain, and they are freaked out by this, and so they're denouncing Europe and becoming nationalist. So now finally Catalonia. Spain has had a terrible time, an unemployment rate over 20%, lasting for now almost a decade. It's a very serious problem. They don't know where to turn. They have a conservative austerity government that doesn't know what it's doing, or worse, is making the situation unbearable. And so it's not surprising that people are looking around for somebody to blame and for somewhere to go. You know, here in America, we're doing something similar by finding immigrants, as if expelling immigrants was the problem we had and would be the solution to that problem. It isn't, it won't be, but it is a temporary palliative. I'm afraid that the struggles in Catalonia between the effort to be independent versus to be part of Spain is a little bit like that. They should be having the right to do that, of course. On the other hand, it's not the problem, and it's not going to be the solution if they are successful. And meanwhile, the Spanish government, in its horrible reversion to things that look really bad, and if you know the history of Spain, is only going to make the situation worse, whether they get their independence or whether they don't.
Remarkable. Professor Wolff, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Tom, and I hope to speak with you again soon.
Thank you, sir.
Call 202-808-9925.
And for more of Richard Wolff's work, check out democracyatwork.info.